Kia ora. Here we go. It's nice and easy. Nice and chill. Just to get you through the week. Start off. Woo! Have a couple of breaths. Remind yourself that you're here. And then I also have to remind myself that I'm also here to do a job. Kia ora, kia ora. No mai hoki mai to another episode of the Kōnai Purangi Sick As. What's been happening? It feels like forever since I have recorded a solo episode, because it has been forever. It's been like almost maybe 3 weeks since I have recorded one of these. Have I planned for this one? Carl, is it going to be crazy? Possibly. And that's what I love about being able to come in here and being able to share my thoughts. But before I do start, I need to say this. A bunch of people have been telling me that, and I've been seeing the numbers, and this thing is growing. I really appreciate it when new people start listening to the podcast. That's fantastic. It's everything that, I never wanted it to grow. I mean, I did want it to grow. Who am I? I did want it to grow, but I never wanted to push it. So I was just like, it's there for people who want to listen to it. So all the new people who are listening, thank you very much and welcome. But to all the people who do listen and feel like this could help other people, I don't do anything in terms of promo. Like, I just post it on my page, and that's about it. I don't go pushing it to anyone, and I don't do any drive for it. So like, it is growing organically, but it comes down to you. A lot of you being able to share it and being able to tell someone. So if you can tell at least one person or share it on your story, that I would be greatly appreciated. I do this all for free for y'all. So that's the least you could do if you take something away. Or you can just say, hey, look at this guy, he's an idiot. And that's also sharing it. No harm. I mean, actually, possibly harm from that. But at the same time, people can go and check out what you are talking about when you say that. So with that in mind, also to your new listeners, old listeners, I come on here to share my thoughts and to talk through different things and wānanga, my own thoughts and things that people have said to me, and then obviously I have guests as well. Unless you are my friend, sorry, I'm just putting up some boundaries. Unless you are my friend, some of the stuff that I talk about on here, doesn't mean that I do this so that the rest of my life doesn't have to be too deep. So I've just, I had a few messages from people, and I had to let them know that, I will cover it in the podcast, but it's not one of those things that I will have additional conversations, or deep conversations, unless you're my friend. And if you know that you are my friend, I'm not talking to you, obviously, because you would know by now. Now that that's out of the way, we can get into what I want to talk about today. What is it that I want to talk about today? It's a little bit about letting go. I kind of spoke about my hair, cutting it, and what that did to my powers. And I think a lot of people were, I had it in my head that if I cut my hair, I'll be getting rid of my powers. And what powers were those in those times? I think contextually, I had a lot of good stuff going on because I had set myself up to be in a good state. And kind of, now that I think about cutting my hair, it's not necessarily getting rid of my power that I had, but it was getting rid of all the things that I was just associated with. But before we get into that, I just want to say one thing. And this has been reminded because I've just been, sometimes it feels like you're fighting. And I think a lot of people, when they start new journeys, you start to feel like there's never going to be a way out. And sometimes when all the forecasts start to look like it's just going to be cloudy all the time, it's difficult to see that light at the end of the tunnel. Have you ever been in a tunnel, and do you actually understand what that means in terms of some sort of phrase? Possibly not. But anyway, just something to keep in mind is aha koa te pauri o te kapua, kei muri te kapua te rā e whiti ana. So even though the clouds are looking super grey and disgusting, the sun continues to shine behind those clouds. So I've spoken about this before on a previous episode where when I was on the plane, it just feels like everything's so foggy, and it feels like everything that's around you is cruddy. And that means that the day is cruddy because what you wanted to do probably can't happen anymore. You have to rug up, and it's a bit cold and quite annoying. But once you get above those clouds, the sun's still shining, the sun's still doing its thing. So that's that persistence, and that's just knowing that we're going to, every single day, the constant is the modi that you bring into that day. So if you can persevere through it, just know that there is going to be a break in the clouds, that silver lining that people talk about. So yeah, it has been Mental Health Awareness Week. Something that I'm still trying to demystify myself, because I don't feel like, a lot of the approaches that people are taking necessarily cover a lot of the people who actually have the worst mental health, and it's probably because mental health as a concept is not as understood. And that's some of the stuff I want to get into today. So it's part of letting go, that association with who I am and who I was with my hair, but some of the new approaches I'm taking into my life. And I think, hopefully some of you can take some good stuff away from this. And have I planned much? Like I said before, Kyle, but that's the fun part. That's the journey we're about to go on. So let's get it. So as I said, Mental Health Awareness Week was this week just gone, and that's why I wanted to wait off recording until after that week to have a few reflections, not necessarily on things that were done or that other people had done or that I had done for myself, but this is something that I reflect on all the time, because I'm always trying to be better. I'm always, trying to live in a state of being content and being the best version of myself that I can be, not only for myself, but for everyone else who's part of my journey and becomes part of my life, or who I indirectly affect by, helping someone else out. And then they go on to have a positive interaction with someone else and potentially making their day better. The first thing I think is part of Mental Health Awareness Week, and it's not that people were speaking more, it's not that, oh cool, you can talk about your struggles more, but it's just that Lion King released their Te Reo Māori versions on Spotify. Now, what does that have to do with mental health? Everything. Part of who you are, your identity, and seeing yourself belonging in art, belonging in mainstream art. And you can see that Frozen is starting to do this as well. And I just feel like this is the part that's missing from a lot of the mental health awareness chat. And since I started this podcast, I've always said that I believe the mental health space is very Eurocentric and very kind of privileged in the types of things that people can do to actually, get that sort of support. Or when we talk about mental health, it is very siloed. It's very focused on just like a few things that people would do, like going to counseling. And that's something that I'm not saying that we don't do that anymore, but I'm just saying that it's so broad. Everything that makes you, part of your identity, and being, feeling like you have that sense of belonging is all part of that. And I think over the past couple of solo episodes, so it's been about a couple of months now, I've just been a little bit more vocal when it comes to the importance of te reo, but also whakaaro Māori, te ao Māori, and just knowing having that cultural understanding of yourself and where you belong, but also as allies, or people who say that you're allies if you are Pākehā. And Pākehā, firstly, is not a derogatory term. It's literally just anyone who's not Māori. But if you are Pākehā, like how you can support that is, by allowing people to express that cultural part of themselves. I have said it before, and I've done an entire clip on it, where part of your mental health is being able to express who you are culturally, and still a lot of the barriers that are in place for you to actually feel like you can properly express yourself. We can't even say Aotearoa on a post without people saying, we live in New Zealand, not Aotearoa, stop dividing the country. And I think this is where a lot of this episode's going to go, has been my thoughts around a lot of this stuff. And it starts with the art and being able to see that in the mainstream and being able to be proud of it. We had, this is not something that I ever planned on getting into, but a lot of the representations of people and just how much of a difference that makes if done properly. And some of the loudest people that I see talking about these issues are the people that it doesn't directly affect. This is the people who have, who, for example, are Pākehā, and they say that they're doing this to fight for, Indigenous people, without Indigenous people actually taking any issue with a lot of things. But anyway, it does feel like forever. So this is me, my mind. We're back to what I do, which is being all over the place. But I just need to update you on where I've been research-wise. And this is just a little bit funny, but it's also cool because as part of cutting my hair, that association with that part of myself, the way that I looked, being the person with the long hair, having all that new knowledge that I had when I did grow my hair out as well. But after that, literally, it's been a month since I've cut my hair, and the just seeing myself with a mullet and just looking at myself and just saying, you look ridiculous, but you rock it. The amount of energy that you have when you go into different places now is so different. And I wanted a new energy. I needed to start, feeling like I was something else instead of feeling stale. And it may sound very like, oh, just go cut your hair and you'll get new energy. But it's the way that I carried myself after that point is like, you're that guy with the mullet now. But also just that I wasn't so pulled down, I think spiritually with my long hair. And since then, I've done some cool stuff. I managed to publish my paper. I talked about this paper ages ago, but my dental paper finally got published, and I've posted it on the page if you're part of that. And it's weird because that one was a dental paper. It was about parents' education levels and what would happen to their children's oral health if they were more educated, less educated, da-da-da-da. And I had such a huge, it was a really long process to try to get that one published. And then I went to the dentist, and I spent quite a few times in the dentist. I went and got checked. I then got a clean. I then had my right side done. Then I had my left side done. It's the first time I'd been to the dentist in a very long time. I hate to admit that. And I paid my dues when it came to paying for the dental work and getting my teeth all up in good order. And then, literally about a week after, I got told we had a notification after not hearing anything for ages that the paper was accepted and it was going to be published. And I'm not saying that this is because of me going to the dentist, but sometimes, it just does pay. And I think the world works in some ways it pays to start walking the talk instead of talking the talk, because I was talking about, oral health and we lead to better, while I was not even doing my own dental care. And it was actually working with a few dentists on that paper that made me realize I should probably go and get my teeth did, especially as someone who's more susceptible to cavities because of my enamel problem. But, that's just something funny to keep in mind. Has there been anything in your life that you're putting off because you just don't feel like you have the time, or you're scared to find out the real truth about what's behind door number 3 and 2 and 1? Possibly. But that's probably a call to maybe go to the dentist, maybe go to the doctor, get a checkup, or anything like that. Because that is stuff that if we can nail it early, it's not going to be as bad later on in life. Also, as part of that, in terms of the research front, with the Health Research Council, I was on a panel, and they were saying that they never usually get people this young or this early in their careers to be on these panels, especially for the projects, because these are big projects. And just not having much experience in terms of research and appraising critical appraisals of projects. But I got to be on that with some really awesome people, and I got to read some of the new research that's about to come out or that could have been coming out. And what I got to do was be on a group who made a decision about what goes forward, what doesn't. And I learnt so much in that process. As someone who's going to be applying for these grants more frequently, it's cool to get the inner workings behind stuff. And I know there's probably so many other people who are better equipped than I was, but for me to have that privilege and to have that opportunity was fantastic. And it's just really cool that they see potential in me. Someone who's this young, someone who doesn't necessarily have the credentials to even be on a panel like that, but that they're seeing that this is an investment for the future and that I'm going to be part of that future and the solutions going forward. So that was awesome as well. And yeah, the letting go, I've just been thinking about this more, and I just feel like I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues, and we have another project that's going on, and we needed to get like a certain part of this project done before we could move on to phase 2. And she was just saying, I don't know why we've got so caught up with having to get phase 1 done. It actually doesn't, it doesn't add or take away from the second phase. Like they will, if anything, the second phase will probably assist with how we do the first phase. And she's just like, I think sometimes we need to let go of the way that we think things need to be done. Obviously, like within reason and having good rationale behind what you're doing. But then it just got me thinking about like all of the ways that I have been and the associations of what's the right way to do things. And I think, COVID and having people working remote and just the different ways of people working, I talked about time as well, and people realizing that, you can actually be more efficient, and you don't necessarily have to follow the 9 to 5 structure anymore and be just as productive. And it's thrown a real spanner in the works for the likelihood of the people who are micromanagers. But yeah, just a lot of things we can start to question. And I think being more critical of where you're putting your time, where you're putting your attention, and some of the systems that we've had in place, and just looking at the outcomes. Are the results really what we wanted? Are they as efficient as they could be? And letting go is all part of that. And I think letting go also offers us an opportunity to see other ways, to bring in and invite new positive or possible interventions or initiatives that are going to get you somewhere else. Like, there are many different ways to be able to complete a journey. There are many different ways to be able to, get somewhere. One may not be as optimal, but if you're happier when you're doing it, then maybe it's still good. Like I said, there are so many different ways, but there will be so many different learnings in the different ways that you do things. And I think as part of that letting go is allowing yourself to see that there are different options available, and not getting too caught up in the routines that you had, and not being too scared. I think this is what I was worried about, was that I was so scared that if I change my routine, then my outcomes are probably going to have to change as well. But I didn't even know if I was achieving my outcomes, because I was just kind of working through everything day to day and barely reflecting. So that's just something that I've been a bit more cautious of. And you think about it, if a rope is like taking off, like, and you're just holding on for dear life, you're just getting dragged along. And I think because you're just getting dragged along, you're having to go with the motions. You're not able to start putting stuff in place to direct it to where you want it to go. So that's just something to think about. That is indeed something to think about. And if you are thinking about it, well done. So before I get into the rest of this, because I am talking about Mental Health Awareness Week, but a different way that I kind of approached it, and something that I needed to come back to. So sometimes letting go is also reminding yourself that maybe the train that you hopped on to new and awesome places was not the train for you, or that it has served its course and you got to where you needed to get to, and sometimes you just need to return back to base. This is the total weird segment where I just talk about te reo Māori and people who get mad with it. So just keep in mind, right? We still have, so I just went on Facebook the other day, and a lot of times when people say Aotearoa instead of New Zealand, people are we live in New Zealand, not Aotearoa, Māori, blah, 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 blah. And then when they come to doing that, they're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're using this Māori, we don't want to do this, you're dividing the nation, making it compulsory, shoving it down our throat, blah, blah, blah. That nasty stuff. Now, I've already talked about one piece of legislation. I'm about to talk about another piece of legislation that also goes to the contrary of what you're talking about, right? So when you speak English and when you do not speak te reo Māori, no one is reprimanding you, right? If you're taking part in some sort of European cultural practice, no one is going to reprimand you or tell you that this is illegal. You cannot do that. When I've already talked about the Native Schools Act, and I've already talked about how they tried to assimilate people in terms of speaking reo Pākehā at school, so English at school, and not being able to speak te reo Māori unless you wanted to get beat. So it got beaten out of them. But then also they have a Tohunga Suppression Act. So the Tohunga are the people who carry a lot of the spiritual and cultural practice and tradition, and they're carrying it with them. And then they also train up new people in terms of the culture and things of te ao Māori. Now, they had a Tohunga Suppression Act, so it was banned. It was illegal to be practicing that, and if you were caught doing it, you were also reprimanded. So they've already, that's already a compulsory act on someone's culture that has been restricted completely. That has happened to none of you. All we're trying to do is allow a little bit more people to just spend a bit more time focusing on te reo. You can choose to partake 100%, or you don't have to. You don't have to at all, but no one's going to force you. Forcing is like I'm talking about here, actual legislation. So we're just lucky that people were starting different movements and actually keeping it alive and risking their own lives so that they can make sure that different cultures and different practices did live on. But that is something that you fragile people do not have to worry about, okay? We live in this world that is going to continue to provide your Eurocentric ways of living. So just let us have that little bit that helps us to revive that. But anyway, that's what I was talking about when it comes to the art and seeing the art in the mainstream and being able to support local Māori acts and local artists as well, because it is through that art, through the songs, through the stories, through everything like that, through the language, that history is brought back to life and cultures are brought back to life, because it is through those that you are threading and weaving different stories of those people, and it comes to light. And being able to support that art is what's going to help it thrive. And that is the first thing that they need to get rid of, because if you do not have if you do not have something weaving into your everyday, then you can then get rid of a culture. And that was what the thinking was behind the Tohunga Suppression Act. So that's just a little FYI for you. And, this is something that I was taught growing up, and I was also taught formally as well in education, and it's something that you can interpret in your own ways. Like, I kind of saw it as a negative as well, but then also the revival and different people trying to reclaim language and stuff is like getting to know yourself. That is part of your mental health. That is part of your hinengaro and being able to be better and becoming that better version of yourself for everyone else. Something to keep in mind. Just something to keep in mind. Anyway, my story for today. All over the place, I know, but part of letting go, like I said before, is part of accepting other parts of yourself. Like, is always reflecting and looking at the parts of yourself that are continuing to serve. And this is a story that I've been, I grew up with, and there's different, as with any creation narrative, there are different stories, there are different versions, depending on, who is telling the story. And this is the one that I grew up with. I've heard different versions, so I'll try to add the different versions in as we go. But this was actually prompted because I was on you would have seen it, I shared that I was on a podcast, and that podcast was called Baskets of Knowledge. And when I was talking about the baskets of knowledge, or they ask you, what is something that you can help us put into the basket of knowledge? And then after that, I had a really good reflection. I was like, man, I think all of my answers have been here this whole time, and I've just been so blind to it. And then from the baskets of knowledge and thinking about the actual pūrākau that is part of the baskets of knowledge, which I'll tell shortly, and how it relates to my mental health, is that recently I've been having dreams. And these dreams have been so vivid and has really played into the rest of my day. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of it. But basically, what happened was I was with my family and I was back home, back up north at my marae Parawhenua. And then we had our awa, so close, like just up around Russell, or the north of the North Island. And then we have a maunga, or a mountain, and a river, or a body of water, so the awa, which is Omapere and then Pukenui. And I don't know why, but I was in my marae, which I haven't been to in the longest of times, but I could picture it so clearly. And I could also picture the sounds, the smell. And the last time I was there, because it's quite rural, I had the worst hay fever. And we all know I still have bad hay fever. So that was also a feeling that was in it when I was in my dream. And I was like a kakahu that came down. So a kakahu, or my korowai that I wore for my graduation, that was also there. It was in the marae, and that's what I was looking at. And then I went over to it, and I was just like, I was looking at it, and I could remember wearing it and just how heavy it was, and how that had to do a little journey down to get to me in Dunedin. And I went through a couple of aunties to get to my dad, and my auntie was the one who was there, and she was telling me, all she said to me was like, you need to go to your maunga, you need to go to your awa, to feel that part of yourself and to, get it. And then, you just, when you're dreaming and stuff, you're you're transporting to all these different places, and you can, because you're in a dream. And when I did, like, I didn't get to climb my maunga, but I got to put my feet into my awa, and like in my dream, I got this weird, overwhelming feeling, and I just started crying. In my dream, I'm not sure if I cried in real life, but since those dreams, I've been having pictures of it. I can see it. And anytime I do think about it, I could just be out and about, just walking, and it can hit me all at once. And I get this I just start welling up and thinking, this is something that I do need to do. And that's reminding me that for me to be complete, I need to remember, where I'm from, who I'm from, and all of that, and being able to express that and being allowed to go through and be able to do that. And I think that's going to help me with reconnecting to a few people who aren't quite connected or aren't quite on the network, getting that 5G COVID. So that's been, that's why my energy's all over the place, but I love it. And I think because I've allowed myself to open back up to that, this is part of that letting go to be able to carry more. Since I've cut my hair, I think all the blocks that were in the way of me accepting different parts of myself are removed. And it comes with that new energy, that new exciting energy of being able to take on new things. But anyway, so I think that was deep, and I hope you appreciate that dream. But basically, the real thing that I was trying to talk about is the baskets of knowledge. So there was two people, they interviewed me, we were talking about my journey, and it talked about, so part of the story was me going to high school, and then me going to university as well. So it's about ngā kete o te wānanga. So the kete, there are three baskets basically, or three kete, and these are filled with different knowledge or knowledges about the world, and then there were two stones as well. So one kete, kind of all the goods and bads, all the goods of the world, all the answers to the world's problems. The second kete is all the evils, or the bad, or the makatu. And then the third was to do with histories, traditions, and oral histories and stories that go with all of that. So basically everything that you'd need to know about this world was in these ngā kete o te wānanga. And then there were also the two stones that I was talking about as well. These were nested in the tiki o rangi, which I think is like the hairdo, what do you call it? Like the top knot of rangi, and we all know that rangi is in the skies. So they're talking about the 12th heaven, and things being housed up here. And then these are where some of the details differ, where in some traditions you'll get that Rehua was the oldest brother, or sometimes they say Rehua was actually a taniwha with another taniwha as well, and they protected those the kete because they're to be for the right person, to be bestowed upon the right person, who will then distribute it out to the world. Basically, in some traditions, for example, they send the two taniwha down to earth where all of the other brothers are, and then they say, they're looking for the right person who's going to be able to ascend the 12 heavens, and then get the baskets of knowledge and then bring it back down to earth. But in this one, the one that I was told, all the brothers, the atua, ngā atua they had some deliberations down on earth, and they all then came to an agreement that Tāne Mahuta would be the person to ascend the 12 heavens up and then retrieve the baskets of knowledge. Now, this is where we get any sort of jealousy, because Tāne was the person who had to go get it. They were like, nah, yeah, you're the right person for the job, after their wānanga, after their deliberations. He starts to get prepared for it, and then Whiro, his brother, who was just like, nah, mate, that should have been me. And I don't know why he sounds like that, but pretty much anyone who's going to get a voice in this piece of art is going to sound like that, or some sort of version of that. He realizes, and he's like, no, that was meant to be me. I should have done this one. So anyway, he then says, I'm going to set out to make Tāne's life as hard as possible as he ascends these 12 heavens. So as he goes to do that, basically, he starts his climb, everything's going good. Tāwhiri Mātea also goes with him as well, and he helps to protect him from all of the creepy crawlies that Whiro sets out on his way. And some would then say that the creepy crawlies, the ones that then were like pushed back down to earth, why we are so scared of some of those creepy crawlies as well, because those were the things that were trying to distract Tāne on his ascent to the ngā kete. So basically, he's going up, but then Whiro also does a makatu. So he does some black magic, right? And this is where he gets into his mind. He starts to put these things out and he tries to make things as either difficult as possible and then also the things that are extremely impossible. So Tane not only has to go through the physical barriers and the physical obstacles of having to firstly ascent 12 heavens, but then also having to deal with the creepy crawlies that Whiro has put out, but now he is getting into his mind because he's put out some dark curses to curse his journey on his way up. Luckily he had Tawhiri Matia who was there being able to blow some of those creepy crawlies away, but then the ones that were into his mind were the things that he had to deal with, all the different things that he knew that he had to fight. So that's like a dark place. It's a very, very dark place. And what you have to do is realize that this is all about the stability of the mind and being able to ascend all the way to the top. So once he gets up there, bam, he gets the baskets of knowledge and the 2 stones, and then he comes back down. But even on his way back down, Whiro is still making it as impossible as he can. I was going to say as impossible as possible. And then as he's coming back down, Tawhiri's doing his best to try help him. And then they manage to get all the way back down to earth. And now everyone has access to this knowledge and it's being bestowed and being kept safe. Whiro is also very, very mad at this point, so he's banished to the underground, but when he's still in the underground, he's able to just still, send out these bad vibes. And that's a really poor retelling of the story. I'm sorry, fans, but basically, this was something that I had to realize. And, when you're going for the knowledge, you can think about it as, literal, and that when you are gaining new knowledge and when you're going into any new journey, it's going to be difficult. You're going to have the things that are physical barriers or proper barriers in your way that are going to make things difficult financially, difficult relationships, difficult barriers in terms of actual people who can't let you get ahead. But then there's also going to be the part that you can't see, that no one else can see. And this is the problem with a lot of mental health and a lot of the things that are difficult, is that you can't see it. People from the outside can't see it. And sometimes it is only you who's able to identify it. Some of the things can come up as manifestations in how you are and physically, but a lot of the time it's what's going on up in your brain, and that you have to be able to decipher that this is actually happening. And that's Whiro. Whiro gets in your brain, and kind of how I conceptualized my journey into coming into education, but then also with my mental health as well, being able to deal with that, is that you're going to have Whiro. You're going to have Tane. And this is something that I learned about happiness. Happiness is a state. Happiness is not something that you always attain and you always have, but it's something that you can aim for and you can get at different times. It's just like Tane and Whiro are always in your brain. They're always in your being, and they're always fighting for attention. But you need to be more Tane than you are Whiro. Sometimes when Whiro comes up, it's that reminder that something's not quite right and something's not, you need to work towards it. And that's where Tane's perspiration, isn't that to do with sweating? Perseverance and everything is what is going to help us get through all the different motions. And they're active at the different times. And what you don't want is you don't want Whiro to overcome that, so you can't feed him. You can't let him in the door. You can't let him stay there for too long, and you can't let him get too comfortable, because then you'll start to overrun the rest of your life. But anyway, that was just something to keep in mind with all of this as well, and that our pūrākau, all the things that we have already known, are still there, and they still make a lot of sense. And sometimes you just have to repurpose it to see what's going on in your life. And I think as part of that, part of my letting go is being able to open back up to that side of myself. And I know this episode was all over the place, but I think I needed it. I think I needed to let you know where I was at. And I think I do hope that some of this stuff resonates a little bit more with a lot of our listenership. Like, I do know a lot of people who listen to podcasts have the time to be able to do it. You're privileged. But some of the stories that you have, maybe you can tell someone, or maybe you can link into it, or read more. And if I was totally wrong with the story as well, and I've interpreted it wrong, let me know. I'm all for it. But anyway, I love you all. Thank you so much for your time. As always, we're going to have an awesome episode with our boy Paul next week as well. And he's awesome. He's a key person in this Fijian community. And he also is a very land heavy. And I'd like to talk to him about all of that stuff and the belonging part as well. So anyway, love you. Take care.